You know, in the world of American politics today, some things just feel impossible. Bipartisan agreement, for one. Decisive action on a really controversial topic. Yeah, right. Well, today we're breaking down a piece of legislation that, by all accounts, simply should not exist, the Epstein Files Transparency Act. And it all starts with a vote that made Washington's jaw hit the floor.
Yeah, you're seeing that right. 427-1. That's the final vote in the U.S. House of Representatives. In an age where Congress can barely agree it's Wednesday, a bill this explosive passed with only a single person voting no. And that leads to one giant question.
I mean, seriously, how did a law designed to force the federal government to unlock its most sensitive files on Jeffrey Epstein just sail through Congress? It's an incredible story of political maneuvering, some really strange alliances, and a public that frankly had just had enough.
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll get into why this law was even necessary to begin with. Then, we'll dive into the political heist that actually got it passed. We'll look at the powerful legal language in the bill, stuff designed to be totally lawyer-proof. Then we'll cover the inevitable fight that's coming with the Justice Department. And finally, we're going to ask the big question. Is this kind of radical transparency a cure, or is it a weapon?
Okay, so to really get this law, you first have to understand what it isn't. You see, all those documents that have trickled out over the years, the stuff people call the Epstein list, well, that's from a completely different universe of records.
And this distinction is absolutely crucial. The stuff we've seen so far, that's mostly from civil court records, basically a legal fight between private citizens, Virginia Giuffre and Ghislaine Maxwell. This new law, though, is a whole different beast. It targets the government's own deep archives. We're talking about the raw, unfiltered work product of the FBI and the Department of Justice.
And what's in there? Well, it's way more than just flight logs. We're talking about raw FBI interview notes, internal emails where prosecutors were probably arguing about that infamous 2008 sweetheart deal Epstein got, and potentially evidence that was gathered under the total secrecy of a grand jury. This is the kind of stuff the government guards like Fort Knox.
So why did Congress have to step in with like a legislative sledgehammer? Because the normal ways of getting this info were completely broken. For years, journalists and watchdog groups tried using the Freedom of Information Act, but they just got slammed with denials or pages that were completely blacked out. This complete failure created a powder keg of public frustration, and that set the stage for something, well, something unprecedented.
So how did this bill that shouldn't exist actually happen? Honestly, it's one of the most fascinating political stories in a long time. This wasn't just a bill, it was basically a rebellion against the leadership of both parties.
And the engine behind this rebellion was this political odd couple. You had Ro Khanna, a progressive Democrat, who saw this as a fight for justice and holding the super-rich accountable. And on the other side, Thomas Massie, a libertarian-leaning Republican, who saw it as a fight against government secrecy and the deep state. They came at it from completely different angles, but they were aiming at the exact same target. And that alliance made it impossible to just write this off as some partisan game.
But they had a huge problem. House leadership did not want to bring this bill up for a vote. Too messy. So they used a legislative nuclear option, the discharge petition. Think of it like a mutiny button. If you can get a majority of House members, 218 of them, to sign it, you can literally rip a bill away from leadership and force a vote on the floor. It almost never, ever works.
But this time, it did. I mean, just look at this timeline. The bill gets introduced in July. The petition gets filed in September, and then bam, November 12th, it hits that magic number, 218. After that, the floodgates just opened. Less than a week later, it passes the House almost unanimously, and the very next day, the Senate passes it without a single person objecting. Just an absolutely stunning turn of events.
Now, the bill's success wasn't just about clever politics. It was also about how incredibly smart the law itself was written. The people who drafted this knew the Justice Department would be looking for any loophole they could find, so they made the text as airtight as humanly possible.
And the absolute heart of this law is what people are calling the anti-embarrassment clause. This is its legal superpower. It explicitly says the government is not allowed to hide information just to protect powerful people from being embarrassed or having their reputations damaged. It basically says, for this one specific case, the public's right to know is more important than a powerful person's right to not look bad. That is a radical idea in law.
The law is also incredibly specific about what can be blacked out, and the list is very, very short. Number 1, protect the victims, of course. Number 2, don't mess up a genuinely ongoing investigation, and that word ongoing is so important. And 3, remove any actual child abuse material. That's it.
That's the whole list. Everything else, in theory, has to see the light of day.
But as we all know, passing a law is one thing. Getting the government to actually follow it, that's something else. The moment this bill passed, a new, high-stakes chess game began with the Department of Justice.
Remember that little loophole for an ongoing investigation? Well, what do you know? Just as the bill was about to pass, the Attorney General conveniently announced a new investigation. Critics immediately called this a gray mail tactic, a pretty cynical move to create a legal excuse for hiding the most damaging stuff, all under the cover of protecting an active case.
But Congress saw this kind of thing coming. They put a really tight fuse on this. The DOJ was given just 30 days to review over 100,000 pages and release them. It's a deadline specifically designed to prevent stalling and force their hand.
And here it is. This is Congress's checkmate move. Even if the documents released to the public are full of black marks because of that ongoing investigation excuse, the law forces the DOJ to give a completely unredacted list of every government official mentioned in the files directly to Congress. This gives them incredible leverage because the committees will know exactly what the DOJ is hiding from the rest of us.
So this brings us to the final and maybe the most difficult part of this whole story. That nearly unanimous vote, it hides a really deep and troubling debate about what transparency even means.
The single no vote came from Representative Clay Higgins, and his argument really gets to the heart of the risk here. He warned that if you just release raw, unverified investigative files full of rumors, dead ends, and names of people who were just witnesses, you could destroy the lives of innocent people who were never charged with anything, all to feed a public hunger for names.
To deal with the risk of both malicious redactions and just pure information overload, a pretty cool tech solution was proposed, a transparency engine. The idea here is to stop the government from just dumping 100,000 unsearchable PDF files online. You know, a classic tactic to hide the truth in plain sight. This portal would make the data actually usable for everyone.
The process is powerful because it's so simple. First, you just ingest all the documents. Second, you use AI to read everything and automatically connect the dots between names, places, and organizations. And finally, you give the public an interactive portal where anyone can search the data, see the networks, and follow the timelines. It turns a mountain of paper into actual knowledge.
And so this law, born from pure public frustration and pushed through by a bizarre political alliance, forces us to face a huge question. We demand transparency to hold powerful people accountable. But when that transparency is so absolute that it can be turned into a weapon against the guilty and the innocent, who is responsible for the fallout? What's the real price of knowing everything?